China's social welfare system in the past 3 decades has undergone a fundamental transformation. This process is a part of general government occurring in the developing world in the new context of globalization. Globalization has produced a structural change of preferences among the major social actors concerning social protection, which in turn induces governments to adopt a balanced and inclusive approach to social protection that is compatible with market competition and continuous development. What distinguishes China in achieving this objective is a combination of the government's commitment to openness and its strategic policy adjustment that working together induce the vested interests of the public sector to accept the new institutions promptly so that welfare programs assist the economy in exploring the new opportunities offered by the international market. In 2010, the governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, visited Japan, Korea, and China, marveling at their high-speed trains. China's, though still in their infancy, were already faster than any in America, by about 120 miles or 190 kilometers an hour. California's ambitions were modest by comparison. To build one line from San Francisco to Los Angeles, it took about 70% the length of China's longest by 2020, 10 years later. A second phase would connect Los Angeles to San Diego down south and merge to Sacramento up north. California was somehow still 10 years away. Meanwhile, the cost had grown from $33 billion in 2008 proposal to $53 billion in 2012, 2.3 times the original estimate. Still, it gets worse. The more impressive thing is that China did all this as a middle-income country. At the time it began its construction, its per capita GDP was just $3,400. If you just adjust the length of each nation's high-speed rail by GDP per capita, the others are microscopic. The country has dramatically more electric buses, for instance, than anywhere else on the planet, by a crazy margin. In addition to that, the much lower cost of labor, the sheer scale of China's plans allowed construction companies to optimize every step of the process and amortize large investments over a significantly longer time and project horizon. A report by the World Bank found that its average cost was at least 40% cheaper than the European equivalent. While Congress hems and haws about big tech monopolies, China's authorities just snap their fingers and break them up. American politicians, it's often said, think only one election cycle ahead, whereas Chinese leaders are free to plan 50 or 100 years grand strategies. There are 3 ingredients to successful high-speed rail. First and most obvious, you need lots of people. Not just a huge number, but ideally a string of high-density clusters. Secondly, it can't be too expensive. It didn't hurt that everything, up to and including the trains themselves, was built in China. Third and finally, a good candidate for high-speed rail is rich. But with annual GDP growth over 10% at that time, it wasn't crazy to think it would soon get there. For trips shorter than roughly 100 miles, it generally makes sense to drive or take a bus, especially given that many stations are far outside city centers. Conversely, for trips longer than about 750 miles, it's usually preferable to fly. These journeys take upwards of 5 hours on even the fastest trains. The space between 100 and 750 miles, but especially below 500, is the Goldilocks zone for the high-speed rail. Too far to drive, yet not far enough to fly. 8 out of its first 10 routes had total lengths within these bounds. It all seemed pretty sensible. And had it stopped there in 2010, it would still today have the longest high-speed rail network of any country. Even if building nothing new for the next 12 years, it would still go down in history as a tremendous accomplishment in speed, scale, and cost. Instead, China kept building and building. Once the giant assumption that demand would materialize and that increased interconnectivity would drive greater economic growth. This was not as sound a bet as it may seem. For anyone living in the US or other rich countries, high-speed rail probably looks like a cheaper, more environmentally sound alternative to air travel. But the data clearly shows in China, the biggest competitor to high-speed trains are older, cheaper, low-speed trains. In a 2015 survey, about half of all the passengers said that they otherwise would have taken conventional trains. Only a small minority said they would have flown. The problem is cost. One study found the average cost to build a 350 km per hour line was 90% higher than even 250 km one, which is still, by the way, considered high speed. This is in large part because the faster lines use elevated tracks which, given China's softer soils, would compress and sink over time, causing a safety risk. To prevent this, the fastest trains require extensive use of bridges and viaducts, which are significantly more expensive than roadbeds made of sand, rock and gravel. These are not Legos, build once and play forever. They also have operating costs. Energy use is not linear concerning speed. Electricity consumption increases much faster with every additional kilometer per hour. All of this is to say, the extra bit of speed is really expensive. Conventional trains cost roughly 2 to 3 cents per kilometer. High speed, triple that. Take a random route on a random day, let's say Guangzhou to Shanghai. The fastest journey takes 6 hours and 48 minutes and costs $124. The slow journey takes nearly a full day but costs just $31. Anyone watching this video would likely jump at the opportunity to spend just $93 more to save a whole 16 hours of travel time. But the same can't be assumed in China. Though there's no definitive value of time, most estimates use of the average hourly wage for business travelers, and no more than half that amount for leisure. A quick back-of-the-envelope calculation reveals that $5.8 per hour saved would be just marginally worthwhile for the average business traveler, but not for the average leisure travelers. Another way of visualizing this is by splitting the population into 10 equal-sized groups by income. What this shows is that $93 is at least half of the weekly income for about 60% of China's population. Of course, in reality, a disproportionate number of the remaining highest income travelers will simply opt for air travel instead. Others prefer the slower option. What would you prefer?